Welcome to Wake, a cold reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, just to hear it out loud. Join Toby Malone and TJ Young, along with some special friends, as we puzzle our way through what we once thought was an unreadable book to produce a surprisingly listenable podcast. It is Wednesday, December 18th, 2024. It has been 210 days since we have started reading, with 532 pages complete of 628, meaning we have 96 pages left to go and are 84.71% of the way through Finnegans Wake. Welcome to episode 34 of Wake, the podcast that occasionally holds your hand, ever so often guides you through, but most regularly abandons you to the wolves as we fulfill a long-held bucket list item, reading James Joyce's Finnegans Wake out loud just once. I am your host, Toby Malone, sadly without TJ Young today, who was called into an unavoidable work meeting. And as we all know, the wheels of academia grind on regardless of what kind of modernist podcast you're working on. So, I miss you, TJ, but I am not alone. I am pleased to welcome an esteemed guest to the podcast, a reader, an intellect, a social media bibliophile of the highest order, who has done the reverse to what I've done, being a Canadian who now lives in Australia. I'm pleased to welcome Seth Austin to Wake. Welcome, Seth.
Toby, it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I could never, pretend to fill TJ's shoes in any meaningful way, but I hope I can at least act as, a bit of filler on that second mic today.
I'm sure you'll do better than the filler, but yes, TJ is very sad he couldn't be here. But I'm very pleased to have a book lover, a scholar of your caliber here with us. Although you said to me before we started that you're an autodidact, so not to expect much. Which
yeah, I feel like you're overselling it when you refer to me as an intellect, a scholar, a bibliophile of the highest order. I'm just a guy who reads books and then tries to figure out and make something useful of them for myself.
But the kinds of books you read, you tend to skew towards the challenging.
Look, I take the hold my beer approach to fiction. If it's something that's going to present something of an intellectual stumbling block for me, I am really in the interest of trying to figure these types of texts out, often with the help of commentary, whether it be formal or informal, something like this. Anything I can do to try and create something useful for myself.
And so the platform you use for that, so we first met on Instagram through our various social media connections as we both promoted our work on that area. So tell me about the W.A.S.T.E Mailing List.
So hopefully that reference lands for a couple of people. My North Star has and always will be Thomas Pynchon, an author who would not exist were it not for James Joyce. W.A.S.T.E is obviously a reference to Pynchon's second novel, The Crying of Lot 49. If you haven't read it, I would encourage anyone to pick it up and take a look. And hopefully, both the handle icon and the name will start to mean something for you personally. The actual channel, such as it is a product of the coronavirus pandemic and the lockdowns that we all went through. That, I think, put a number of us in a position of some sort of kind of social isolation. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking for a way to connect with people on something that filled a certain intellectual void in my life. And so I made the channel on a whim, met some fantastic people on there, and have just been posting about books and book-related content ever since.
Right. And then you have the Instagram channel, but you also have a YouTube channel now.
Yeah, I'm on various platforms. Instagram, the artist formerly known as Twitter. I think they call it X now.
Mm-hmm.
Will not be doing that. But YouTube, Substack. I've popped in on a number of different podcasts now. Pleasure to be on yours.
Yeah, very glad to have you here. And I'll make sure that I promote all of your various platforms in our show notes. And we actually have a mutual friend, Anna Dahlberg, was a guest on Wake a few weeks ago, and she spoke very highly of you and your encouragement when it came to the Wake for her.
Anna is lovely. She's so nice. I believe she read the Wake in Portuguese. Did she?
No, she read it in English.
No, sorry. It was she was reading Herman Broch, The Death of Virgil in
That's right.
Portuguese. Yes. She's a great reader. And the fact that she was able to tackle something like this with English not being her native language is even more impressive.
It is. It is. Yeah. And she used you as a motivator to, as she, every time she felt like it was a little bit too hard, she said, well, if Seth can do it, then I can do it, which, I'm sure is not meant to be an insult.
Oh, love it.
Yeah. So tell me about your relationship with Joyce. When did you first encounter him? What is your, what's your background with him?
Yeah, Joyce has been floating in and out of my reading life since late high school, as memory serves. I have a distinct memory of reading a couple of the early stories from Dubliners in kind of year 10, year 11. And then there's a big gap in my memory until first year uni, which was where I got the only arts classes in my entire university education, where I read a couple of chapters from Ulysses, which were assigned to us. And I had no idea what to make of them then.
Mm-hmm.
I know only slightly about what to make of them now. But it was only really in the last 5 years or so that I really started to dig into Joyce. So I read through, the big four: Dubliner's Portrait, Ulysses, The Wake. I've also read at this point Chamber Music and Giacomo Joyce. Haven't gotten around to Exiles, haven't gotten around to Palma's Pennyake. I don't know if I'm saying that one right, or Finn's Hotel. But, working on being a completist at some point.
Right.
The Wake in particular has been a particular maelstrom that I've been kind of avoiding and dipping my toe in for several years. I can tell you about my just horrid response to it the first time I encountered it in 2018. But
yeah, I'd love to hear that. Yeah.
You've spent some time in Sydney, correct?
Yes, I have.
So you would be familiar with the Chatswood Public Library.
I sure am, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So I remember going down in there in 2018. I went to take something out. And I saw this title by this name that I had a cursory familiarity with, James Joyce, and it said Finnegans Wake on the front. Oh, that's an interesting title. Picked it up and I opened up the first page, and River Run past Eve and Adams. Okay. Oh, Commodius Vicus. Don't know what that means. All right, we'll just keep going. Scraggy Isthmus. Oh, okay. And then I got to the Thunder word.
Right.
Oh no, I don't know what this is, but this is well beyond my skill set. And I closed it, and I didn't think about it or touch it for another 2 years or so. And then I had a false start with it in 2020 because that moment in that library, it never quite left me. I was like, man, what the hell was that thing? Was that even English? And I came back to it in 2020, and I made it about 50 pages in, and then couldn't do it, couldn't continue. And then it was only last year that I actually read it through it in its entirety. And I was finally like, oh, this is one of the best things I have ever read. This is so much fun. I have no idea what to make of it. I'm going to spend the rest of my life thinking about it. And here we are today.
Yeah. Oh, that's a wonderful journey. Yeah. I feel as though there are so many of those stories of those false starts and those moments of challenge. And it's one of those things that I think we've really based a lot of our work on here in this podcast, is to say, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to make sense. You don't have to understand every syllable, because you probably can't really, not in a lifetime. But you can take from it what you will. And so we had a guest on a few weeks ago, Sarah Kane, who's a Joycean from Dublin, who messaged us after appearing on Wake to say that she was encouraged enough to attend a Finnegans Wake reading at Sweeney's Pharmacy in Dublin, and now she's turned her Ulysses reading group onto the Wake, and they're all very excited because she realized that she didn't have to be an expert to take it on, and so we can all accept it in different ways. For me, my take on it was maybe a decade ago. A very smug academic person who I knew. I mentioned that I'd read the three of the four big ones of Joyce, and now I was going to turn my attention to Finnegans Wake. And she said to me, you can't do that unless you can speak ancient Greek. And I immediately went, oh, is there something you know that I don't know? And then, of course, that's such a facile approach to what this is, because, yes, I'm sure there is plenty of ancient Greek reference throughout the Wake, but to suggest that you can't read it if you don't understand it all is madness. Because, like you say, it's a book that I'm going to be fixated on for the rest of my life, because there's so many ways in and so much to take.
But also, I've never been fond of the exclusivity model of literary aptitude. It just strikes me as something that, if we were all to take up that particular approach, all we are doing is isolating potential enthusiasts to these incredible works of art, and all you're going to do is consign them to the bowels of history, and they'll disappear faster.
Right.
I really don't think that's the way to approach it. And also, this notion that you can only read if you can speak ancient Greek, that's just false. There are upwards of 60 different languages that are blended into the Wake speak of the text. It's just, it would definitely be more than that, even if that were true. So,
exactly. Yes, I'm very glad I didn't let it dissuade me too much. Part of this is a little bit of started out as me saying, no, actually, I'm going to do this anyway, regardless of what you think. And that person almost certainly isn't listening, so I don't really care even about sticking it to them. It's more just.
But also, setting aside exegetical or analytical understandings of the text itself, I've always felt like the most appropriate litmus test for a prospective reader of the Wake was, do you like the way it sounds? Do you like the musicality and the rhythm and, how it just moves and bounces through your ear into your head? And if that's something that appeals to you, that's kind of all you need to get started. And you can do the hard work of trying to make sense of it to whatever extent that's possible after the fact, post hoc. So, there are people who may disagree with me on that, but part of the reason why I love this project that you both are undertaking is that you're inviting people in, you're opening the door and just saying, come on in, it's warm inside. There's a lot of fun to be had here,
Yeah, and we keep surprising ourselves with how much we laugh when we read and how much we uncover. And the whole model is that we don't prepare. So, we do a little bit of context, maybe a little from the outside, but we don't go over the text in advance to see the difficult words to practice them or anything. So whenever you hear us laugh on the text, it's because it's surprised us, and it surprises us all the time. And that's such a gift that this 100-year-old text is remaining surprising, because Joyce is, he's just working on a completely different level.
But that's also one of the keys, sort of, I don't really believe in prerequisite requirements, but one of the non-negotiables in my mind of the Wake is it's something that really does need to be listened to or read out loud as you're reading the page. I think there's so much oral, AURAL, and auditory, again, to borrow that word, musicality to it. There are people who suggest that it shares more in common with metered poetry than it does with prose. That's a subject of argument for sure. But there's something that happens in your brain, that synchronicity between what you're hearing and what you're seeing. When you put those things together, it's just this entirely unique neurocognitive experience. So I really do encourage anyone who's thinking of picking it up to either read it to themselves or listen to the phenomenal Barry McGovern audiobook, or listen to us limp our way through it. I do think this is the way that Joyce would have intended it.
Yeah, I think so too. So when you first did that reading and you quit after 50 pages, was that a silent reading, or were you reading aloud?
It definitely was. And the successful one last year was a combination of me. It depends where I was when I was reading it. If I was on the train, it had to be the audiobook while I read the text in front of me. If I was at home alone, then I would be muttering it under my breath like an insane person while my partner was going.
And I admire the fortitude it takes to do that without a motive, because I the only reason this podcast exists was because I needed this to keep me on track. Because I think if I had tried to do what you did, which was to read it alone at home, muttering it to myself, I don't know if I would have stuck with it. So now we're 532 pages into this thing, purely because I'm I feel accountable to TJ and to my guests and to the listeners, and we're so close to finishing now that I feel very confident that we will. But I think if it was trying to read it alone, I guess that's why the reading groups are so successful and so prolific out there.
But I don't think Joyce is immune to the understanding that people need something to hang on to get them through the text like this. And in this particular circumstance, I think pattern recognition is something that gets underappreciated insofar as there are certain archetypical schemas and patterns that will recur throughout the text. Sometimes they're auditory, sometimes they're events, sometimes they're names. Like the one you see probably most immediately is the recurrence of the HCEELALP initialism throughout the text. Those characters just bubbling up to the surface. I mean, we're about to tackle the Haveth Childers Everywhere fragment. That's another HCE iteration, but this is the first time in quite a while where I've seen Earwicker kind of bubble up from the sort of protean mist that makes up the text as a whole. And that's that moment that goes, there he is. I've been wondering where he was at. Fantastic. And
I always look for him as well, like those initialisms. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because he's so omnipresent, but then he appears so rarely. He's spoken about so often, but we see a lot of his children, we see a little bit of his wife, and then we see a lot of the colourful characters of Dublin who speak about him. But yeah, the moments when he gets to show up, those feel like very, very significant moments to note. And so we've spent a long time in this yawn segment hearing Sean defend himself, and so getting a chance to have HCE show up and lay out his case is a real treat. So this was a segment that you nominated. You reached out to me, it must be 4 months ago, and said, I'd love to be on the podcast. This is the segment I want to do. And I checked finnwake.com and looked for that phrase and went, that's on page 550 or something. So you're really willing to wait. Okay. So what is it about this section?
I find it among the most interesting in the novel because I sort of see it as something of a fulcrum point as another age in the Wake cyclical history starts to turn over. Or another way you could think of it is this fragment, it captures this fundamental patriarchal anxiety focalized in this relationship between both Earwicker and his sons, Shem and Sean, or predominantly in this chapter, it's kind of been Yawn. I think it goes Sean, Juan, Yawn as memory serves, right? Yeah. So I think this is, again, it's one of those moments where HCE bubbles back up to the surface. And after this conspicuous period of absence at the beginning of book 3, when the Sean, Juan, Yawn kind of archetype takes center stage, this moment where Earwicker reemerges and presents himself to his family and to this sort of kangaroo court, there's a lot going on that maybe we can kind of touch on after we read through the passage. But it seems to me kind of a really important interfamilial and almost political dynamic. So we can either talk about that before or after.
Yeah, let's talk about that after. And why don't we jump into the reading? And thing that we generally like to do is to leave the context till after, so that we get surprised as we go. But as always, we're reading from the Penguin Modern Classics edition of Finnegans Wake, published in 2000 with a foreword by Seamus Dean. Today we'll be reading the fourth part of chapter 3.3 from pages 532 to 554 in this edition. This continues the segment with the detailed title of Yawn, an inquiry run as a seance by Senators 4, with the various events so far narrated. Or Yawn is another star witness, ventriloquizing or channeling the characters who appear one by one, with HCE as a philanthropic urban planner dominating the last 20 pages. And I've been teasing that last 20 pages for the last 3 episodes, but now we finally get to it. That is a summary by Oxford World's Classic edition of 2012, which also includes brief summaries of what is happening in each subsection, which we'll address at the end of the reading. And now, without further ado, Finnegans Wake.
Amsterdam, sir, to you. Eternus situs heil. Here we are again. I am Bubba brought up under the camel act of dynasties long out of print. The first of Shittrick Silkenbeard, or is it Owllaugh McAlscapeth the Thord? But in Pontofax Massimust, I am known throughout the world wherever my good Allanglashian is spoken by Saul and Will from Augustinus to Ergustulus, as this is. Whether in Farnham's Wrath or in Condra's Ridge or in the middles of Dalkin or Monkish Township, by saints and sinners, I alike, as the clean living man and, as a matter of fact, by my half-wife, I think how our public at large appreciates it most highly from me, that I am as clean living as could be, and that my game was a fair average since I was perpetually kept my Ouija wicked up. On my Vera wife, I never was, nor can afford to be guilty of crimcrog con, of malfeasance trespass against parson with the person, of a youthful giggy girl, friff friend, chirped apples, acted by Miss Dash, and with any of my cousins in Killisov's Slut's Garden, or Giglot's Hill, when I would touch to her dot and feel most greenly of her unripe ones, as it should prove, most anise and far too behad, needless to say, to my reputation on Babel Malkut for daughters in trade being lightly clad. Yet, as my acquainters do me the complacence of apprising me, I should her have arrested under my disguise of whippers through tombs and dempies, lagmen, was she but tinkling of such a tink. And as a mere matter of fact, I tell of myself how I possess the ripest littlums wifuki around her globalette's globes, upon which she was romping off on Floss Mundi, out of harm's way round Skinner's Kirkasally first, and with her consolation prize in my serial dreams of fair women, Mannequin's Pass, with awards in figures and smiles subsections handicapped by 2 breasts and opera tops. A remarkable little endowment garment fastened at various places. What a spurt! I keenly love such, particularly when savoring of their flavors at their most perfect best when served with heliotrope eye lips, as this is, where I do drench my jolly soul on the pure beauty of hers past. She is my best preserved whole wife, so well her as hereafter in Evan's eye, with incompatibly the smallest shoe number outside Chinnitins. They are jolly, dainty, speckin' tooly. May we not recommend them? It was my proof piece from my prentice serving. And alas, our private chaplain of Lambeth and Dolkey Bishop Regionary, an always sad-faced man in his lute-string pew cap with cabinet band, who had visited our various hard hearts and reins by imposition of foo-foo fingers, also Haddock's thumb, in our upper room can speak loud to you. Some quite complimentary things about my clean charactering, even when detected in the dark, distressful through recital proved to me as this is. When I introduced her Frankfurters, nummerines, why drive fear? To our four-poster toonies, chanteringly under the Cassatruci Senior and Demelios, who whopping oldsters, with sycamon euphornium, in either notation and altogether cage house deckheim on Goosna Green, that cabintini home sweetened through affection's horty pains, first Merkiss, and so they sank-eyed. Dodo, oh, clearly, and Gregorio at front with Johannes far and back. Ow, ow! Gleeglom, there's some gnomes sweet places, and there sweep no wigs. By whom is my Kirk Findlaters, ye little church rondown ye corner, and KK cactus cam? Enjoineth in the belief, and, as you all know, of a child, dear humans, one of my life's ambitions of my youngard from an early PP period, while still be hedge school intended for Broadchurch, I, being fully alive to it, was parochially confirmed in Caliphate's bed by our bougie beloved curate author. Michael Engels is your man. Let Michael relay Sutton and tell you people here who have a phony habit. It was remarkable. In his clairaudience, as this is, as only our Michael can, when reach around his superstation to bring ruptures to our roars, how I am amplify. Heem la Colin. Pim ornery 4.5. Sean Shemsen say when. Homestock unsteaden. Liv Pumark. Iliorg Hoogs 1-4 tups noying. Big butter boost. Sorry, thank you. That'll be all for today. Call it off. Godnotch. Verboily. End a muddy crush mess. Appreciates anew your gustums. Kyow. Tack.
Tic-tac. Tic-tac. A wind a-buzz, a water falling. Pour a cow his due placator. It's the damp. Calm has entered, big calm. Announcer, it is most ernst teruli a morsome internament. Colt's tooth, I will give Tanzel to it. I protest there is literally not one teaspoon spill of evidence at bottomly to my babad, as you should see, as this is. Keemung lapsang of first pickings, and I contango can take off my dudda dirty 9 articles of quoting here in Pinex Park before those in heavens to provost myself by gramercy of justness. For Veryman and Mormon, stiff and staunch forever, and enter under the adversaries of Messrs. Norris, Southby, Yates, and Weston Incorporated, to their favoured client, to my pre-Protestant caveat against the pop-up publication of libel by any Tix Tim Tipsy Loom or Tob Tom Towley of Kairis Lean, a blow-eyed lane joint, wearing low-belt suit, with knock-breaking knees and bull-fist rings round him, and falls round axe hand, his convesset Saunters nocelorets, and the Pose Toffee's directory in his business, the best begrudged man in Belgradia, who doth not belease to our Pavia, to my none such, that highest personage at moments holding down the throne. So, to speak of beauty scouts in elegant pursuit of flowers, searchers for tabernacles in the celluloid art. Happen seen sore eyes belived? The caca cad. He walked by North Strand with his Tom's towel in hand. Snake eye, strangler of sophisticated green parrots. I protested that he is by my wipe half. He was leaving out of my double inns while he was all teppling over my single exits. So was keshaned on for his recent behaviour. Sherlock is lorking for him. Alara belt spanners, get your air, Kurt. Shame upon Private M. Shames on his fulsomeness. Shamus on his Atkins cum lullul lying sullen for an outcast mastiff littered in blood corish. Aristocrat till hanging tower, steck a javelin through his advrow-tried heart. Instanton, flap my Larry bird, dangle my high flyer, jiggity jig my jack and dalline. Let me never see his wad fez again, and mine it was, Barkthold Van Hunerig, so sown of furrows, our spring like his gesture, imitate my cry. As yours now, so yours then. When to our lot it fell on my poplar sex, my sexon centenary, when by gate of hell, before his hostel of the Woden man, I hastened to freehold it op, to his his mamman, magiscules, his magnus magistic, first city's lease case of his Nova Tara, a most noble, when Ross bucked on his priceless charger, Ferdinand Alabaster, yet not need light or till Norway for you fanned one o'er every doorway. With my all bums greethums through this whole of my promises, handshaky congratulate-thems, excellencies. Who saw the jackery dares a hand grip of this abreast? Does Macca's ginger? Someone we was with us all fours. Adversarian, the spiking doivel, first liar in Lund's End. Wolf, see ye scargore on that sheep's brow. And those miseys, sulkin tarts, man sicker I at air bluffet conservative? Shucks. Such ratchhole bugsmess I cannot barely conceive of. Lowest basement in High Street, obscenous nonsense, nog-sacked, per-peeler and poor, the broker-hearted shoe-gone, whole affair is rotten muck-swinish porky-pig's draff. Inouch! Is that you, Whitehead? Have you head noise now? Give us your misspilt reception, will yez? Pass the fish, for Christ's sake. Old Whitehouse, he is speaking again. Ope usus tube. Pity poor Whiteoath. Dear gone mummeries go by. Tell the world I have lived true 1,000 hells. Pity, please, lady, for poor O.W. in this profundest snobbing I have caught. 9 dirty years mine age, hare's whore, mummery fail in, snowdrift to my elbow, deft as adder. I asked you, dear lady, to judge on my tree by our fruits. I gave you of the tree. I gave 2 smells, 3 eats, my free Andes, my cellar berry mates, my happy bosoms, my all falling fruits of my boom. Pity poor haveth childers everywhere with mudder. That was communicator, a former colonel, a disincarnated spirit called Sebastian from the Rivera in Januaro. He is not all here. May Fern speak shortly with messages from my dead ported. Let us cheer him up a little and make an appunkment for future date. Hello, communicate. How's the butts? Ever skepistic? He does not believe in our psychos of the real absence, neither miracle, wheat, nor soul surgery of P.P. Quemby. He has had some indigestings, poor thing, for quite a little while, confused by his tonguer of babble. Away with him, poor Felix Colour Parrot. Ring his mind, ye staples. Bonds. In my old Reekery's Ballyheart, and in my Crumlin, and in arrondisement, and in Stramus. Sax Elethery. Bam! I deplore over him ruly. Mongrieff, O hone, gesterned with the nobilities, to die bronchitic in Asherus. So enjoying of old thick wiles, in hote white toffs hoit of our formed reflections, with stock of eisen all his prop, so Buckley hosiered from the royal leg, and his puertas mugnum, he would puff out a dimful bock. And how he would husband her that veriker fully, his cigar divine. He would redden her with his vestas, but 'tis naught. And with us, his nephos and his neberls, mest incensed and befogged by him and his smoke thereof. But he shall have his glad stein of our Zoba beer best in Oscar Schall's wine tavern. Buen retiro. The voice is still floutish, and his mouth still wears that soldier's scarlet through the flaxifloids are peppered with salsadine. It is by cause of what he was ascend into his prisons on account of. I wit it well. Hence his depraised words. Some day I may tell of his second story. Mood. It looks like some one other bearing my burdens. I cannot let it. Canes, naught.
Well, yeah, man, I have bared my whole past. I flatter myself, on both sides. Give me even 2 months by Laxlaw in 2nd Division, and my first broadcloth in business will be to protest the recorder at Thing of All Things, or Court of Skivanies, with Merchant's Grey, Antient Incredible, Zero Bubble Barentone, Jonah Wally, Determined Coddle, or Cucumber Upright, my jurats, if he does not occur again. Oh, Rymus! Har Fagar, Wild Hearts in Homeland, Herod's be the non. Mine Kinder come, mine wool be won, there be nothing like Luther. Oh, she! And Nosty men's in glad houses, they shad no pegged stones. The elephant's house in his castle, I am here to tell you, indeed to goodness that, albeit I discounted bell persuasions in runiciations of pomp of here therefore, was to wax too well in hand. I'm thurgadot to do me dope of her miscaprinks by the virtue of those filter oviconas, presently like brown embracing Christianias after Irishers, to convert me into a Celt. But first I must proxy Babbities, my old Antonautes, when, as Sigismund stolter forth with Rabin Robrost, for my auspicer and leecher ruddy of my life first in Lorenza Patorn, Aaron till Vectre, when I will westernize these poor sun-uppers and out-brighten their land's eng. A man should stump up, and I will pay my pretty decent prize for my glucose, Peebles, word even, as this is the legal Eric for infelicitous conduit here enclosed. Please find my pocket-anchored check. And, as a matter of fact, I do undertake to discontinue entirely all practices, and I deny, in whole sweeping in toto, at my own request, at all stoitness to have confermentated and confoderated, and agreed in times pre-bellic, when here were wonders for the trainsfolk, as it were, now nuggently laid to me with a friend of mine, Mr. Billups, Pulliter, my quarter brother, who sometimes he is doing my locum for me on a grub stake, and whom I had clept constoutment, for so it was felt by me at goodbye cooped cops by escapature, a mouthless Blanchette Brewster from Cherna de Jama, Blauland via Brigstow, or to ill-sell my fourth part in her, which, although allowed in Deuteronomy, as in several places of Scripture, copyright, and excluded, they should have rightly verbanned thee, would seem eggs excessively harrowing to my free limbs for 2 punt Scotch, 1 pollard, and a cockard or 3 pipples on the bitch. Thou, Fricks Flame, Udin Sulphur, who strikest only on the married box, enquick me if so be I did cofatus my lady's maid. In spec of her beaver, she is a womanly and a sacred. Such wear a frillock for my comic strip, Mon Meg's Monthly, come out of H. Finnegans Wake, to bray at by clown sillies at Donkeybrook Fair. It would be Lakin makin' hodders and cockers arithmetic, the unpardonable preemption of all of her yon, by Junith Moneta, if she, Irish Marian Teheresian, had been disposed of for her consideration, I, Ledwick Salvatorius, am tradefully unintrinsited. And if she is still further talc slopping over her cocoa contours, I what McAngars, am strongly of opinion why I should not be. Improbable. I do not credit one word of it for such and such as magistivers, just feathers, nanoninities, or to have octroyed to resold or borrow by exchange the same super Melcart, means help. Best Brixton High Yellow, no outing, cent for cent on auction's bridge. 'Twere a honorably crudely welt so tantamount to our leaves and scatab orgias we devour about in the mighty evil rooms of ancient Carthage. Utterly improbable. Not for old Crusoe's or white soul of gold, a pipple on the panis, 2 claps on the council, or 3 pock-pocks Cassie knocked on the postern. Not for 1 tetsy-ticky culprits coined, or for all Eckes and Kuznehofs. So hemp me, Cash, I mean it.
My herrings, the absurdity of it. I mean to say, her bare ideas, it is choo-choo chucklesome. Absurd bargain, mum, we'll call. One line with. We'll ate every day sormone like a boyne of Ive, oh. The 2 cherry-pickers with their Catherinettes, Lizzie and Lissy Mycock from Street Flesh Shambles, with a moon at orb with Hesperum and I their coven guardian, I would not know to concact such gretched youngsties in my ways from Haddam or any suis seers or high heiresses of theirn, claiming by, through, or under them. Oos of their freeing fan into mine foyer. Her is one which resembled to mine anomaly. The man which shocked his shanks at Conti Carlos. He is Duke Collion. Each habe go-haired uptaking you are in a sense, but we send you meet so's in face. Duke Collion. Oda. E-villing chimbes is smut-sick river blot, but the hard casted their ass pigsteins up and Kongan shootsman in Schotzentoff escasont. Eigen du Collion. I liked his goddam chick. Studdertub. What a shrubbery trick to play. I'll put my oath head under my white pot for ransom of beeves, and will stand me where I stood mine in all free heat between Pelagios and little Christaeus, by Roderic's our most monolith, after my both ears to ear and breeches boy Bibles, and Minhattan testify to my unclothed virtue by the Longstone erection of our all-first man here. I should tell you that honestly, on my honour of a near wicked, I always think in a word's worth of that primed favourite continental poet, Daunty, Gouty, and Shopkeeper, A.G., whom the generality admires is in this, that is, and that this is to come. Like as my palmer's past policy, I have had my best master's lessons, as the public knows. And do you know, homesters, I honestly think if I have failed lamentably by accident benefits through Shinto, spite-fired, pur-plagued, and cram-creed, I'm doing my did's bits and have made of my prudentials good. I have been told I own stolomines or something of that sort in the sooth of Spanion. Have I said also how I abhor myself vastly, truth to tell, and do repent to my nether heart of sundry clothing? The amusing part is, I will say, Hotelman, that since I, over the deep drown Athacliath, to seek again Irlanding, shamed in mind with 3 plunges of my rudder tail, yet not a bottlenim, vanced imperial standard by weapon right and platst mine residence, taking board and burgage under starry misty, and ran and operated my brickstall selection here at Tholstall, for mean straits mail with Everidge Fimmel, in commune soccage among strange and enemy, among these plotlets in Poplan's town for Fort Dunlop, and then on sea, whole of Serbonian bog, now city of magnificent distances, good walled about with talus and counterscarp and pale of palisades, upon martial siegewen, with abbot war to bless, on yon sloped day of clean tariffs. In that year which I have called mirabilis, and overdrave these marken, the sword on whence his schlores was mine, and mine in the Prussian stock of Albrecht the Baron, under patronship of our good Kingsingturns, T.R.H. Urban first and Champagne Cholliman, and hungry the loaved and hangry the hathed, where my tenure of office and my toils of domestication first began, with weight of woman my scat, and sculled but fluky of the ravens as my sure piloter, famine with English sweat and epidemics. The 2-toothed dragon worms with all sorts serpents has come politely seceded from this land league of many nations, and open and notorious naughty livers are found not on our rolls. This seat of our city it is of all sides pleasant, comfortable, and wholesome. If you would traverse hills, they are not far off. If champagne land, it lieth of all parts. If you would be delighted with fresh water, the famous river, called of Ptolemy the Libnia Labia, runneth fast by. If you will take the views of the sea, it is at hand. Give sea! Do drum colliga, whatever you do. Visite drum colliga la belle. Be souk and see, so erst drum colliga. Vidi drum colliga e poi munis. Things are not as they were. Let me briefly survey. Proclam a shun. Pip, peep, pipitch. Ubi pop j piped. Ibi pep goes the whistle. Here Tyburn throttled, massed murmurs march, where the bus stops there shop I. Here which ye see, yea, rest. On me your sleeping giant. Estot santo. From the hold of my capt in altitude till the mortification, that's my fate. The end of oldest Moses is the beginning of all disorder, so the last of their hands ballis shall the first in our sheriff's bar. New highs for all. Nidu negru may be black in torn, but under them lintels are staying my horny men meet, each his mansig mad. For peers and jints, quasers and galileers, fresque litties from the say and stale heady gabblers, gangers and duddo wagoners, pullars of societies and pushers on Rothmere's homes. Obeyance from the townsman spills felicity by the town. Our boos and politico-comedy are in safe with good Jock Shepherd. Our lives are on shore and sorting with Jonathan's wild and great. Been so free. Thank you, besters. Hattentats have mindered. Blowbays, devil bobs have gone from the mode, and hair-trigger nicks are quite out of time now. Thuggeries are rear as Glover's meetings, lepers lack, ignorance show beneath suspicion like the bitter halves of esculepoids. In middays molesite let Miled discurve self. Milud in her Hyde Park seed minuet. All is Waldy Bonums. Blow-nose Arios, we luff to you. Firebugs, good blazes, lubbers, keep your podies drier. Seamen, we seg your skivs and wives. 7 ills so barely as centripunts have I happed, 77s for circumferent in captive are your hill prospect. Braid, Bladford Rock, the Caitlon, the Liberton, Craig and Lockhart's, A. Costafino, R. Thurset. The short of Nicholas within was my guide, and I raised a dome on the wherewithouts of Mycon. By awful tours my well-worked buildings sprang sky-spearing spires, cloud-cupoled campaniles. Further this. By fine ounce and imposts I got and grew, and by gross scruple I grown outreachesly. Mirage and lestage were my mains for overlords tithing, and my drains for render and prender the doles and the tribute. I was merely out of my mint with all the precursors on my brain cap, till I struck for myself and mutched morally by token. To sear her by gambled in ruddy money, to Madame of Pittymount I love yous. Paybads foreigners moved in Huguenots against us, and I met them, Peps to Pabst, Bartholomew, Milrays, Mark, Onfell, and Luke. I arose Daniel in Leondon. Bullafest envied me, Corcutters gratched at a bay. I braved Bean Bierum to barrow him against the Lochlans, all his tolkies shrieking, Fugabolags, Luska about. If they had ire back of eyeball, they got Danage on front tooth. Theirs were revelries at Rydotto's, here was rivalry and redoubt. I weg-shicked Duke of Wellinghoff to reshuckle Roy Shackleton. Well halloo, mornin' plain. Under laws martial and Warshar did, I thole till Leeds plumbate, ping on pang, relieved me. I made har feast upon us a corpulus and fast broke down in Neederthorpe. I let fair views in on Slubberdens, but ranked Rothguards round Rothminders. I bath and bad end on mendicity, and I cured off the unnoculated.
Who can tell their tale whom I filled ad litem on the plain of Salisbury with 300 peepers and twas? For sleeking beauties I spinned their nighten veils, to slumbered beast I tummed the thief air. Round the musky moved a murmels with muses, Winard and Bellas zoomed. 10 dulcis tunes like water parted fluted up from the Westenders from while gorges in the east came to the strife of orangutangas. All in my thickville escatere often was thorough fear, but in Meckling of my burg Belvaros was the sight forbid. Tuberculoses. I rees spudfully from the Murphy plants Hawkinsonia, with berries from plethores of the Irish shoe. I heard my liberty lands making free through their curgcombs, my true blues hurra-salaming before Wellington's wall. I rich-mounted the Rhine-lag of my bathtub of roundwood and conveyed it with the cheer and cables, roaring mighty shouts through my longer tubes of elm. Out of fondness for the outer-zone, I carried them and curried them to my poots-and-down cars and my commandy hotels. I made spouts spontaneously from Philip sobriety in that coupe that's chained for noon inebriates. When they weaned weary of that bibbling, I made infusion more infused, sour pacers of the fine garth, obtemperate unto me. When you can think me in these copy cuffs, look and where would you mucka me? As you pay in caveman's shelter, taught the ites like you course the teas. Wherefore, watch ye well. For, while I uplooked the first of Janus Strait, I downsaw the last of Christmas steps. Syndic potostril, and on the rates I, for indignant and indentate. In forum foster, I demonstratated my folk friendship, and me pupils felt my Burke was no worse than their bright. Suffragetta and Conscientia were undecidedly attached to me, but the maugre mantries and the anti-parthenopes my Schwalbe words with little spongalettes at their soak eye, pokies, and botchbon a fume. Fletcher Flemlings, Elizabeth, how interquakeringly they rogated me, their golden one. I, in hesitant made replique. Mestemaids, the Lurcher sponsor, And who in Hillside, don't you let fire fly till you see the whole whites on their bunkers' eyes? Mr. Answers, bring 'em young, bring 'em young, bring 'em young. In my Bethel and Sullivans, I accouched their rotundities, and turnkeyed most insultingly over raped lutietas on the lock. I gave backs of biscum to the Jacobiators, and the pottage bakes to the assousted. I delivered them with freakendansies by the constant droppings of my smalls instalments, while I tit for talt on their farandays for them on my slataper's slate with my Chandler's chalk. I jaunted on my jinglebret wrapped in neckcloth and sashes, and I beggared about the amnibushes like belly in a bowl. In the humanity of my heart, I sent out Hayway Woman to refresh the bell-wearied, and then, doubling megapolitan politeness, my greatest of these charities devalorized the base fellows for their curtailment of the lower man. With a slog to the square leg, I sent my boundary to Botany Bay and ran up the score on 4 of me's while the Yanks were huckling the Empire. I've been recipeing ominous letters and widely signed petitions, full of pieces of pottery about my monumentalness as a thingaballs, and I have been enchanting causeries to the fitchest choilaboys, so that they be all calling me for the song of a birch, the more secretly by-built and the more openly palastered. A tent, couch, here. I've becked my Volden-built hutch in sun's midnaught, and at my Morgan rise was encompassed of mush-roofs. Rest and be thankful, with license. Thanks. I considered the lilies on the veldt, and unto bulkies did I disclothe mine glory. And this missy, my totters, and this man, my son, and my fife from the villa of Ostmanorum to Thorstrands, recte Thormers Sraid, and from Huggins Police to William Ingalls his house, that man de Londres, in all the barony of Saltus, Bonders, and Faubourgers, helots and zealots, struttering ogies and swattering macks, the Darsy Jamsies, the Drury Joneses, red maids and bluecoats, in homage all in felony, all who have received tickets, fair homes overcrowded, tidy, but a little furniture, respectable. Whole family attends daily mass and its daily stick of bread and butter. Sometimes in the militia, mentally strained from reading work on German physics, shares closet with 8 other dwellings. More than respectable, getting comfortably parish relief, wage earner freshly shaven from prison, highly respectable, planning new departure from Montgomery cyclist finish, eldest son will not serve but Paresis big man up in the sky scraps, a new panadoon lacking backway, quasi-respectable, pays ragman and bones for faded window curtains. Staircase continually lit up with guests, particularly respectable, house lost in dirt and blocked with refuse. Getting on like Rose Distillery on fire, slovenly wife active with the jug. In business for herself, has a 10th illegitimate coming, partly respectable, following correspondence courses. Chucked work over row, both cheeks kissed, at levee by late Marquess of Zetland, sharing closet, which is profusely written on over with 11 other subscribers once respectable, open hallway pungent of Baltic dishes, bangs kept women's head against wall, thereby disturbing neighbors, private chapels occupy, return landings, removal every other quarter day, case 1 of peculiar hopelessness, most respectable, night soil has to be removed through snoring household, eccentric naval officer not quite steady enjoys weekly church warden, and laugh while reading foreign pictorials on clump stump before door, known as the trap, window rheumatic and chars, haunted, condemned, and execrated, of dubious respectability, tools over costly pledged are uninsured, reformed philanthropist, whenever feasible takes advantage of unfortunates against dilapidating ash pits. Serious student is eating his last dinners, floored dangerously for unaccompanied old clergymen. Thoroughly respectable. Many uncut pious books and evidence. Nearest water tap, 200 yards run away. Foul and bottled gooseberry frequents on table. Man has not had boots off for 12 months. Infants being taught to hammer flat piano. Outwardly respectable. Sometimes hear from titled connection, 1 foot of dust between banister and cracked wall. wife cleans stools, eminently respectable. Outwork and regular loafer should be operated. Would she consent? Deplorable rent and roof. Claret cellar cobweb since the pontificate of Leo wears drilled trousers and collects rare Buddhas. Underages, very treacly and verminous, had they been separated, sits up with fever cases for 1 and 3 pence. Owns 2 terraces, back-to-back breeze. Respectable in every way. Harmless imbecile, supposing weak-minded, a sausage every Sunday, has a staff of 8 servants. Outlook marred by ne'er-do-wells using the laneway. Lie-abed sons go out and sisters immediately after dark, has never seen the sea. Travels always with her 11 trunks of clothing, starving cat left in disgust. The pink of respectability resting after colonial service labors at plant. The despair of many benefactresses. Calories exclusively from round trees and dumplings. 1 bar of sunlight does them all January and half of February. The V-to-V's animal diet live in 4-storied, semi-detached but rarely pay tradesmen. Went security for friend who absconded. Shares same closet with 14 similar cottage in an ill-framed lodging house. More respectable than some. Tea-widow pension but held to purchase. Inherited silk hat from father-in-law. Head of domestic economy never mentioned. Query how they live. Reputed to procure, last 4 occupants carried out. Mental companionship with mates only, respectability unsuccessfully aimed at. Copious holes emitting mice, decoration from Uganda chiefed in locked ivory casket. Grandmother has advanced alcoholic amblyphobia. The terror of Goodman's Field, and respectable as respectable can respectably be. Though their horrible omission were the horrors I could have expected all, let them come. They are my villains. The chartularies have trelledged them. Wherefore I will and firmly command, as I willed and firmly commanded, upon my royal word, and cause the great seal now to be affixed, that from the further of their fathers, of their children's children they do inhabit, and hold it for me, unencumbered with their heirs, firmly and quietly, amply and honestly, with all their liberties and free customs, with the men of Tolbris, a city of Tolbris, heaven Tolbris, in the county of their city, and through my whole land. No. Hereto my vouchers, Nibe and Snuffbutch, fee for farm, in recus us rex.
Struggling forlongs I have libramentoed, mills on mills of mancipels. Lo, I have looked upon my pompadours and their esancies, and my drummers have tattled tall tales of me in the land. In morganatics lit I hope, in Cyril cellars looched I bleak mealers. On my siege of my mighty I was pasterful of my subject, but in street walks that are darkest I debellum superb. I deemed the drug tails in my petticoats, and domstered dusty feet in my husken close. At Guise they were swathed, at Fuchs slashed, the game for a Gomez, the loy for a Lynch. If I was magmonimos as stady lave-giver, I revolutionized by my eructions. The high and by wayseeds I scattered them. In my graben fields sowage I gathered them. In Sheridan's circle my wits repose. In black pits of the pested l'enfant he is dumbed. Hearts of oak, may ye root to peace. Rechabites abstain. Clay sheets pine-shrouded, wake not, walk not, silento morgue. Quo Waronto has his greats my Soliven and puissant lord, v. king, regards for me, and he has given to me my necknamish philisterate, which is second fiddler to Nomen. These be my gentilician arms. At the crest 2 young frish, etoiled, flappant, devoiled of their habiliment, vested sable with druers argent. For the boss a colipopter, pendant, partifice-wise, blazoned sinister at the slough proper. In the lower field a terce of lanciers, shaking unsheathed shafts, their arms crossed in saltire, embusked sinople. Motto in letters portent, Hiri cras evo hodi. Idle were it, repassing from Elsa ground to the elder disposition, to inquire whether I, dragged asunder, be the forced degeneration of group marriage, hollow cryptogram of my ascends, or carried of cloud from land of locust in Utzel galley born, I, huddled till Simone be the mass product of teamwork, 3 surtouts ripped up in inch others, 2 twin predicoxes lived as one, trouble and trine or dub Lilden too, for Abram nude be I, or roberoid with the Fenians, of Fijian of grafted ape on merfish, surrounded by obscurity, by my virtus of creation, and by boon of promise, by my natural-born freeman's journeyman right, and my other churches in her light, in so and such a manner as me it so besitteth, most surely I pretend and reclaim to opt for some simultaneous, till day bow break and show shadows flee. Thus be heck. Verily, verily. Time, place. What is your num? Bun. Who gave you that num? Pooh. Have you put in all your spare pennies? I'm listening. Shree. Keep clear of propennies. 4. Mr. Televox, Mr. Toby Stim, and invisible friends. I may mean to say, annoying part of it was, had faithful Fulvia, following the weaning courses of this world, turned her back on her ways to gone on up hills upon search of louvers, brunette men of Ireland, Chief North Paw, and Chief Goes in Blackwater, and Chief Brownpool, and Chief Night Cloud by the Deeps, or again had Fluvia, amble which she was, left her chivalry crocus bed at the bare suggestions of some prowling bywayman from Moabit, who could have abused of her, the fox rogues, there might accrue advantage to ask where in pell-mell her deceivers sinned. Yet no, it was vastly otherwise, which I have heard it by Mummy Good's waif, as I chiefly and most heartily ever, for Fluvia, idle woman to the plusny born, did ever did ensue Tilstead things that pertained unto fairness. This warrum I am fond on, that which was loosed. Even so, for I waged love on her and spoiled her undines, and she wept, oh my lors. Till we meet, ere we part, tollolol, this time 100 years. But I was firm with her. And I did take the reach of my delights, my jealousy, ye matched it, be yak make it, ear swathed, snout snooded, and did raft her fluming worthily, and did left lead her overland the pace from Lax Leap up to Liff Slope, tiding down as Port Reeve should, whimpering by Kevin's Creek and Hurdlesford and Gardiner's Mole, long Rivery Side Drive, Embankment Large to Ringsend Flot and Ferry, where she began to bump a little bit, my dart to throw, and there by Wave Brink on Stronda South, with maize to mast high, Tallius cow howling, quailless hijakes, did I upreased my magicianer's punt pole, the Trident sire to Triton stock, Ferula, and I bade those fizzy boisterous seas to retire with themselves from Os, Rookwoods thou sea stem auror, and I abridged with fine Norsemanship till I had done abate her maiden race, my Bearsark bride, and knew her fleshly when all my body did I her worship, min bry alpswive, heaven be whole thundered, heydays he flung bliss for hers. And I cast my 10-span joys on her, arched, overtopped, from bank of call to echo bank, by dint of strongbow, Galata. So strang were we were in one maelstrom of she-gulf, and to wring stress I thumbed her with iron of Erin, and tradesmen marked her leaf-lang mind for all and singular. Ide, Igon, Morgans, and for Ervigeds, base your peak, you, strike your flag. What screech of shippings? What low of Danfbulls? From Liveland, Hox Zivius, from Letland, Skal Vives, with Empress of Asia's and Queen Columbia for her paranymphs, and the singing sands for her bride's music, goose gaze anointed uns, canals canzoned, and me to she her shy blooms lifted, and I pudded a name and wedlock bolton round her the witch to carry till her grave my Durden dearly Appia, Lippia, Pluva, Belia, which I hair lifer Amstel had been, I changed her chaste mate to grip fuming snugglers. Her trambarette I bestank so to spunish furiosos. I was her hawk-sized, her Clevanto, her Everest. She was my Annie, my Laurelad, my Pisaved. Who cut her ribbons when naught my prows? Who espoused that havenliness to beach-allured anchorides when not I, Friporter? In Trinity huts they met my dame, pick of their poke for me, when I foregather 'twas my sumbad. If I far seek itch my list, had I not work it in my cattegut with Dogson's crots to clean, and had I not gifted of my coataways Constantinople's aim, and fortift by my right as man of capital, I did ungirdle her about my vermicelli vinaigrette, with all loving kindness as far as in man's might it lay, and enfranchised her to liberties of fringes, and I gave until my lilang youngers turkey thighs, soft goods and hardware, catalogue pass 'em, and ladder-proof hosiery lines, see Stockinger's raiment, coquette coiffes, see Agnes's hats, and penningsworths of my best taste of nags of jets and silvered water roses and jaws of my pretty novelties, and wispy-waspy frocks of red ferns and laurelworths, transparencies such as women, cattle, bear, and peltries piled, the peak of pims and slines and sparrows, lumens days, limonous luxuries, on looks, la primere, pira, pirine, or de Rhinabo, Sourire de Ever, and a crinoline wide a sheer, and patents for her trilobes that know she might the tortures of the boots and beads of wampum, with to toy and a mercery glaze of shard to mirror, for all daintiness by me in thee time. The Copenhagen hour, and I wound round my swanchen's neckplace a school of shells of moils marine to swing their sayings in her silence, and upping her at king's count, her aldrich cry, Olos unheading. What though exceeding bitter, I pierced her beak with order of the Dannebrog. Cunig's great, soul leave, with mares grease cressets at Leonard's and Dunphy's and Madonna Langthorns, before Quintacassus and Tullenkindles, spearheads singeing, Knickenbookers and mutton lightburns dipping downs in black holes, the tapers of the topers and his bunting pole at hoist. For days there was no night, for night was for days, and our folk had rest from black heathen, and the pagans from the prince of Pacis. What was trembling sod quaked no more, what were frozen loins were stirred and lived, gone the septua, dark, deadly, dismal, doleful, desolate, dreadful, desperate, no more the 12 man's bloody, gloomy, hideous, fearful, furious, alarming, terrible, mournful, sorrowful, frightful, appalling. Peace, perfect peace. And I hung up at Yule my dwindling Eulunus, helped of kettle flashnose, for the soup whore of my frigid one, Columbia mea, Frimosa mea, in waste windy Tard Strait, and Elgin's marble halls lamping limp from black to block, through all of Livania's vaulted empire, from anodes to cathodes, and from the top Zolites of morn, Wickenlow flare by Arklow sapphire Seomen's lure, and Wexterford's hook and crook lights to the polders of high Kinsella. Haven't you seen my pearls a-hummin' the crown to my estuarine munificence? 3/5 of the sea I swept with draftness, and all empties I bottled 'em up in Bellenport. When I stabbed Maroon, Jack, and Maturin, I was a bad boy's bogey, but it was when I went on to Sanct Pieter's bark that they gave my devil his dues. What is Caesar can hack in the old world, a Sawyer may hew in the green. On the island of Bresel, the wilt of me perished, and I took my ploughshare sadly, feeling pity for me sword. Where bold O'Connie weds on Altamaha, the tawny sprawling beside that silver burn, I sate me and settled with the little creature of my hearth. Her intellects I charmed with, I call her utile thoughts, her turly hide I plumped with potatoes for Emian's peace in plenty, my bibulous beadels shewed her triumphs of crafty guild pageantries, loftus Adam doffed our counterclaw her, Con and Owel with core-topped baskib, Sire Noe Guinness, exposant of her bargainess, and Lord Joe Starr, to hump the body of the camel, I screwed the emperor down with 9 pins Gaelic, with 6-penny halfpence for his hanger-on. My worthies were Bist and Trist from Joshua to Godfrey, but my processus prophetarium they would have plauded to perpetuation. Moral. Book to Monsieur. C. Press. He's not all bum and bully, but his members handily fool him. Stevings grain for Greek's Greek collegium, the SS Padrix in the harbour.
And after all these things, I fed her, my Carlin, my Berlin Leinster, upon spiceries for her garbage breath, italics of knobby lotch, and the rich morsels of my morlabone, and shanes of garlics, and swine's peeper, and gotherkrauts, and pinky dillisks, primes of mechalays, and subtleties in jellywork. Come the feast of Saint Pancreas, and shortcake nutrients for Pass and Pingster's pudding, bready and nuttalled and potted flesh meats from store damp kuchen, and the drugs of Kaffa and Julepa, and shallots out of Ascalon, feeding her food convenient herefore, to pass them into earth. And to my saffron-breathing mongoloid, my skin sig, I gave Boyeric's pulliver and Holiv's oils, unguents of cuticle, for the swarthy Serchel's face on her, with hand-doers and groin scrubbers and a carry-cam to tease her tussie out, and brown but calmly, a mopsa's broom to doist her sate, and club moss and wolf's foot for her more moister wards. Amazing efficiencies. And my shop-soiling doveling, when weeks of kindly kinleys civicized in our saloons esquirial, with fine-glass bowways, draped embrasures with gilt-edged librariums, I did devise my telltale sports at evenbread to wring her withers limberly. Wheat-eaters, slap-bang, draper cut by Dean, Bray, Knapp, Spinato, and Ranter-go-round. We had our lewd mayors, and we had our lairdy mayoress, kayotowing and smooling full-face on us, out of their famous lateness, oilclothed over cohabitation, all pointed by Hind. Tamlane the Cossack, Dirk Weddingston, Peter Stuyvesant, Outlawry O'Neill, Mr. Kearns, Mrs. Ryson Figgis, Mrs. Dattery, and Mrs. Prunyquetch. In him we trust, footwash and sext principles. Apply to overseer, Amos 5-6. She had dabbling time for exhibiting her grace of Aljambras and ducking the bloodinobes of her Vauxhalls, while I, dizzed and dazed by the lumpty-thumpty of our interloopings, fell cocksure off my ballast. In our Windsor Palace it vampered for Ellanders. We lubdued Sir Gud for sleep and ghosts. She chafed her fuseries in my Wingan's jewels, while she scalded her memories on my Snorrison Sagos. In Paycook's Thronsail she domineered. Lecking ices off the dormer panes, all admired her in chemises. On Rideau Row Duana dwells, you merk well what you see. Let welleth were I panto creator, would theirs be tights for the gods. In little writ redding hats, and sindry yellows, and tinsel, and glitter, and bibs under hoods. I made nuisance of many well-pressed champadors, and peddled freely in the scrub. I fordrine for thee, and more than formate. I preve for thee in the haunts of the jolly bale of fray light leaves for sturdy traymen. Pelvis ad hombres sumus. I said to the shiftless prostitute, let me be your fodder. And to Rhodes and Pater brothers chow chamaraday, evangel of good tidings, omniant on the healer's word, for lost loathsome and wholesome ever will, who, in regimentation through liberal donation and coordination for exorganization of installation and augmentation plus annexation and amplification without precipitation toward the culmination in lactification, what was formerly their utter privation, competence, cheerfulness, usefulness, and the mead shall, in their second atoms, all be made alive. My toe tug steered down Cannel Grind, my lighters lay alongside the Regalia water, and I built in herbs and rue for mini escaladade, my shiny brows under astrolabe for my observatory, the aired closet with shony ejector wherewithin to be squat quit and most convenience from her Sabbath needs. when open noise should stilled be. Did not I fix the mortarboard, my universe Ceres, wholly rational and God-alike, sophister again, sore fister, life-sizers all? Was I not rosetted on 2 stellas of Little Egypt? Had not I rock-cut readers, heroes, Gregos, and Democritos? Tricastellated, bimetallized, and by my 7-dialed changing charties, Hibernska Ulitza made not to pass through 12 thread needles and Newgate and Vicus Veneris to Coinsite, my camel's walk. Colossa, no porta sublimer benared my gatties. Oi polled, ye many, but my few were chosen. Voter, early voter, he was never off to for old Sarum. Terminals 4, my stadies were, the Ginar, the Grisawia, the Debwifwick, the Mifgriwis, and I set up twin ministers, the pro and the con. My stave kick wore no norsely of peeled wands. And a touchy flood mud, now all loose brick and stone fist, freely masoned arced for Covenanters and Shinner's refugee, descent from above on us, Hagia Sophia or Australia, our orisons thy nave and abseeds, our aeon tone aeons thy stood vast vault, hams, circuitacy. Shemites retrace, horns, hush, no Barclays. Here round its holies. All trontrolls made I cumpole, all rubble gnomes I pushed gow. Castles, Redmond, Gandon, Dean, Shepherd, Smythe, Neville, Heaton, Stony, Foley, Farrow, and Bost with Thorncroft and Hogan too. Spread serve me. Goblin's guard. Trek my Tilleries. O tribes, O Gens! Keep my keep, the peace of my 4 great ways. O thighs infernals to Booth's salvation, arcane celestials to Sweetenberg's well hell. My 7 winds I trailed to Mazer, and ever a wind half saving close, and all these closes flagged with gust. Hoops for her, hats off for him, and ruffles through Niblo's guarding. And that was why Balbulus was raising his wall and elting the Suzannes of his neighbors. And thirdly for Ewigs, I did reform and restore for my smuggy pagan sknees, my sweet cock-looped, my auburn coquailing one, her patty palace on my cross-knoll with Magso bell, Sixton clash clossant, Duminos and Mezzonates, to command the fitful, doom-a-din-dim, and the oracle of the lauds and the tell-forth glory. And added thereunto a shallow labor to slub over her hellfire and posy windles for her oriel house. Gospelly, pew milieu, Christus pew milieu, Zachbut's bowboozended, all goals tara-ruled, and she sass her knack, chili bomb, and 40 bonnets upon the Ulster stain. May all have mosty honours. Hoke, 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 hoke. And whole hail, sniff ale, drear drizzle or sleet showers of blessing where it froze and Chalix Eller swum on the vestry. With fair-skin book and ruling rod, Vena my virgin page, her Chester ever did I learn my little Anne a country mouse and alphabeteer, camel temper. From Aldebrick to Tannayou, with Myra Ratton at her dundrum. Oya, oyer, oyer, oyer. And I did spread before my Livy, where Lord Street lolls and ladies linger, and Chamomile Pass cut Primrose Rise, and Coney Bends bounds Mulberry's Island, but never a bild had bledded and blooded since long agore when the whole bloody acre was bladely well presovered. My selvage mats and Letchworch lawn, my carpet gardens of Gurdon City, with Chopes Pyramidus and Musalimes and Beacom fires and Colossests and pencillers for the boost pleaches of the Semiramis, and the esplanadas and the statuesques and the templiogs, the Pardonel of Minuth, Fra, Teobaldo, Nielsen, Rare Admirable, Jean de Portaloo, Canal Gretaclock, Guglielmus, Collis, and the Eilic Edilis, Passivacant, Glorietas, in Excelsior. For Erx days and fully days, till the complete animus of Calandrius, Gregomorius, and Gillips, Julians, as such to be pleased of theirs to walk. And I planted for my own hot lisping lass, a quickset vineyard, and I fenced it about with a huge Chesterfield elms and Kentish hops and rigs of barlow and bowery nooks, and green-washed villas, and pampas animals, and an eye, necessitates a glacius and ponds for aqueducts, a Hawthorne, a fiery Glen, a hollow Val, the Dirach, the Fimarch's How against Licky Bud Month, and Gleaner Month, with a magazine wall, rim, 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 for a queen's garden of her phoenix, and hush, hush, I brewed for my alpine plurabelle, wig-warming wench, speakeasy, my Granville brand old Dublin live up, the free, the froth, the frothy fresher, puss, puss, pussyfoot, to split the spleen of her maw. And I laid down before the trotters of my ablanate, my stony battered wagon ways, my Nordsome circulums, my Eastmoreland and my Westmore, running ballywards and suddenly parading, hearsmen, opslow, nuptialers, get sorting, whereon, in mantram of Truman, like yeoman, expect till duct, Conca doctor summoning him all farts to pay. Velkommen in hink and hung of the Vone of the Husse. Clydesdales, Rythe, Abbenstreeds, Romers, Reichs, Rickenshaw, with Hinspain's King's trumpeteers, mad-ridden Mustangs, Buckaroo Steve's Broncos, Postershades and turnintaxis, and tall, tall Tilburys and noddies, others giggling gaily, some sedated in sedans, my pre-coping gents, a roger, my dampened cells soft-saddled, covertly, and lawdy-daw a perch behind. The mule and the hinny, and the jennet and the mustard, nag and piebald shelties, and skewbald ockneys, step it lively. Lift ye the left, and rank ye the right for her pleasure. And she laughed in her diddy-did domino to the switcheries of whip. Down with them. Kick. Play up. Mata-ha-ha-ha, mara-ha-ha, lo-ha-ha-ha, John-ha-ha-ha. Oh, good Lord.
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. That was the fourth and final part of Chapter 3.3 from Finnegans Wake. Seth, how you feeling?
Oh, mate, that was... I knew what I signed on for, but I also didn't know what I signed for because I've never had to read it that loudly out loud. Boy, it takes something out of you, but it brings you along with it. There's a momentum to it, you know? I stitched myself up there a little bit at the end because there was a word I just picked up when I was reading it that I never noticed before. Bottom line of page 553, turnintaxis.
Right.
So I mentioned earlier that the handle that I use online is W.A.S.T.E Mailing List, and the premise of the Lot 49 book is, among other things, a rivalry between two competing mail carrier services.
Right.
One of them is known as the Trastero, and the other one is turnintaxis, which was a real-life mail carrier. I don't know how I never noticed that before, but I love the little synergy between my love for Pynchon and my love for Joyce. It's great.
From just a quick look at the Finnwake glossary, turnintaxis is a former German state. The counts of Thurn and Taxis had a monopoly as German imperial postmasters from the 16th into the 19th century. So there's your connection. So there's very clearly.
Oh, I love it. That was a good one. I thoroughly enjoyed that. It
good.
Was, I gotta say, it was a bit of a train wreck at parts when I was going through it, but hopefully it was...
No, not at all. No, I mean, the fun thing about it is it becomes quite theatrical in the end, where you read and you sort of are able to catch the momentum of what's happening in the text and then really play it out. And this section that you chose to read, I mean, it's a great one. It's that because we suddenly get a singular voice, and it's and this massive defense that HCE lays down for himself, essentially restating most of the well, not only the contents of the book prior, but also the entire history of humanity, and all in this giant defense.
And we are in agreement that the dominant speaker throughout this passage is Earwicker, or the HCE archetype. Yes?
Certainly, yeah. I feel as though there's a lot of, methinks the lady doth protest too much in here.
Yeah.
Where HC is like, there's all this stuff about me, but this is why I did all the stuff. Oh, I did this, and so it is a lot of that defensiveness, but in a really interesting fashion. And yeah, it was. You do get that momentum that you don't get elsewhere, because elsewhere in the book, you're the voices aren't distinct, whereas this one felt like the voices were quite distinct. So how did it feel? Did you find? I mean, you've obviously mentioned the reference there that you pulled out, but did you notice different things when you were reading it in full voice?
There was a lot of talk of respectability I never picked up before. Who's respectable? Who's not respectable? I'd have to sit on what that was trying to get at. Maybe we want to take a couple of minutes to litigate our theory of the case, our interpretation of this section. Do you have any thoughts you wanted to start with?
Well, I mean, I think the whole idea of the respectability, I just reread Dubliners this week, and it's so interesting to view Joyce within the context of the world in which he was writing, where what was scandalous then is nothing to us now. And so you read Dubliners and you think, what on earth could people have had a problem with in this book? This is so benign. But obviously it was much more immediate to the people who he was, it was banned for obscenity. I mean, not quite in the same way that Ulysses was, but certainly like they wouldn't print it because they felt like it was going to be libelous. And so clearly a lot of the stuff that HC is accused of and is dealing with, whether it be what happened to him in Phoenix Park or what happened to him with the ladies, or the what we find out about early on in the book, or the rumors, he's clearly got a lot to defend, but whether or not what he has to defend is worth all of this, it's interesting. Yeah, so I find his full-throated defense does seem to match up with the level that he was accused, but whether or not it would even be a blip nowadays is a whole other thing.
It does seem to be like a lot of the time spent with Earwicker in the book, he's postured in something of a defensive crouch. And I have a bit of a thought as to why that might be the case. I mean, we've established by now that the nuclear family, the Earwickers, they're the kind of central dramatis persona of the Wake, right? Of course, there are other characters outside of that immediate circle, but the point stands. The positioning of a family at the center of the Wake is not some narrative contrivance on Joyce's part. The embattled family is something of kind of a prototypical model of social history, and their struggle is kind of representative of larger institutional legacies. I mean, at its core, the Wake documents cycles of growth and dissolution of power throughout human history. And Joyce isolates this feature, this non-negotiable feature of history in the family unit. It operates through these recurring archetypes.
Right.
I think back to sort of chapter, 2.3, when HC takes on the form of the Russian general who's shot by Buckley, and Buckley's kind of comprised of the Shem-Shan composite, right?
Right.
Even in modern families, you'll find kind of a father figure holding on to power imparted on him via tradition, the patriarchy, as it were. And so every son is born into a world crafted by this preeminent authority and has the innate task of trying to overcome that authority, only to then compete with his peers so that he might inherit the dominant role in whatever next cycle of patrimony occurs, because this is a book of cycles. And it's in book 3 that we see this Sean Wan Yan character kind of taking center stage. And I view HCE in a position of fundamental insecurity because now his son is sort of embodying that dominant role. I mean, my read of the cyclical sort of arc of the book is that HCE will eventually become falls off the ladder, and then the Shem-Shan composite will embody the next HCE as the cycle turns over.
Right.
It's kind of replacement theory. Again, people will argue over whether nobody's been able to agree in 100 years as to what it all means, but it strikes me as HCE in this defensive crouch throughout this entire passage is basically saying, no, I deserve to be here. Look at all these incredible things that I've done. I'm the one who needs the power here, but it's inevitable that he's going to be supplanted by his sons. I don't know if that remotely resonates with you.
Yeah, it does. I mean, obviously, there's a real Oedipal element to a lot of this, the idea of the son killing his father, and whether you can extend it into Freud and whether Joyce was that interested in that element. But I feel as though that cyclical nature of whether it's Greek gods and titans, the idea of that generational shift that becomes when you're the teenager. Every teenager, I have a teenage son. Every generation, a teenage son grows up thinking that they know all the things and that challenge their father, and that's the way of the world. My father used to have this wonderful line where he said, when I was 16, my father knew nothing. When I was 21, I was amazed at how much he'd learnt in 5 years.
I love that. That's great.
Which is obviously so much to say. We assume that the older generation is the dinosaurs, get out of the way, old man, let me get in there. But then once you get to the age of being replaced by your own children, you think, I've still got things to give. Or in anyone who's been in a position where they're held up in their employment because they've got people in front of them who are due to retire but won't, you think, why don't you just retire and let the younger people take over? But once you get to that age where you are eligible to retire and you think, but I've still got things to give, you forget that you were once in that position being held up by the people who wouldn't retire. And so it's a similar kind of thing. I've got me right now, I'm 46 years old and I feel like I've got plenty to give. But then I go, my 15-year-old son probably looks at me going, come on, old man, get out of the way. It's my generation now. And so, I feel as though there's a lot here where HCE is forced to lay out his resume and to sort of say, these are the things that I've done. This is what I created, and this is what I brought to the world. Whether it's a defense that is requiring a response, whether he's actually fighting for his life or whether he's just accounting for himself. But it's such a relief to hear HCE get to speak for himself finally, and so as opposed to being spoken of so often. It's a really interesting one, and something that really brings up. I mean, I think the thing that really came to me throughout all of that, the idea of this. I felt as though this section would be ripe for someone to animate, in terms of illustrating this text with, visualizing what's being spoken in the creation of the world, this creation myth that he is walking through, and it very much it's very biblical in many ways, the creation of the heavens and the earths. But this progression of creating all of humanity. And it's interesting because the reason why I came back to that is that just this week, the Irish Times published an article on Finnegans Wake and how Finnegans, and it was very much advertising a new book that's just come out through Edinburgh University Press. But Richard Barlow wrote an article called Finnegans Wake, Untangling Its Histories of Humans, the Animal World and the Environment, and very much talking about how Finnegans Wake is all about this microcosms of existence that are being played out through all of these different stories, where Joyce specifically set out to write a history of the world. He said, I'm going to write a history of the world. And then he said later that Joyce said, it's like a mountain that I tunnel into from every direction, but I don't know what I will find. So he's just this tunneling through, uncovering all these things and then laying out that history of the world. But the the Joyce part now is that it's not just, the Gospel of Sean or the Gospel of Shem. This is the word of the Lord. This is HCE. This is the Creator who is telling us all these things, the cyclical nature is inevitable. But I think he's not going to go down without a fight.
But let me ask you this, given the opportunity to make a case for himself, do you think he comes out looking sympathetic, or do you think the position that Joyce puts him in this almost deposition, is almost an indictment of him?
Yeah, I think there's a desperation to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it's quite persuasive. I think after a while, you sort of go, you feel a little sorry for him. You acknowledge that, wow, you really have done a lot of things, and it is amazing. It is impressive what you've achieved. So maybe there is, I'm not sure it changes anyone's minds, because it's also difficult to know who's in the right. Sean and Shem have been fairly unreliable narrators in throughout this. So, it's a really interesting way in. I found, and I'm really glad that we got it. I think we needed it. I think we needed it at the end of this third book to finally hear from Godot, essentially, because they spent a lot of time waiting for him, and then suddenly here he is.
I like how you use the word desperation, because I do think that he's butting up against an inevitability of him being, the end point, if you subscribe to my reading that he's destined to become Finn McCool, he's ultimately going to lay down and fall asleep as the sleeping giant upon which the next cycle of history will be laid.
Yes.
I haven't listened to every episode of the show yet. How much have you guys talked about Giambattista Vico so far?
We've name checked him, but we go out of our way not to do any research on this podcast.
Sure.
It's terrible. We probably should do more. We do a little bit. We pull up bits and pieces, but no, we haven't. I mean, I'd love if you have some illumination on Vico here, because we name checked him right at the beginning, because obviously the cyclical nature of his work inspired Joyce. So in the context chapter, we talked about that a little bit, but we haven't come back to it. So yeah, do you have some context on that?
Well, I mean, because I don't know how long it's been since you guys talked about them, just to briefly refresh, Vico, 17th century philosopher, and he proposed this schema in his seminal work, La Scienza Nuova, The New Science. There is a pathway that most of the world's societies follow: 3 successive ages: theocratic, aristocratic, and democratic, I believe is how they went, followed by this inevitable 4th age, a return from civility, the democratic or human age, back to the theocratic, God-fearing era of barbarism. He called that the Ricorso, and these correspond with the 4 books of the Wake. That's kind of the orthodoxy that is generally spoken about in reference to what Vico offered the Wake. I think it's a little more than that, but if we just take it at his word there, this thought process about history inevitably, curling back on itself, this ran directly contradictory to the Enlightenment theory that was fashionable at the time. They were, his contemporaries were proclaiming this righteous march into a rational, progressive future. But as far as Vico was concerned, this kind of alleged progression was just another spoke in the eternal wheel of history, which would eventually reach its crux with the installation of a tyrant, descend into state failure, and then inevitably circle back to that tribal animism and blind god worship. The reason I like this Haveth Childers Everywhere chapters, I think this is that moment. I think HCE is positioned as that tyrant, that weak monarch who is trying to cling on to his power, but it's going to go one way or another.
Right.
And I mean, if the Richard Ellmann's biography of Joyce, if it's to be taken credulously, Vico's theory also kind of served as an ideological compass for Joyce. I actually pulled up a quote from there. Can I read it to you? It's a short one.
Sure, go ahead.
My political faith can be expressed as such: Monarchies, constitutional or unconstitutional, disgust me. Kings are mountebanks. Republics are slippers for everyone's feet. Temporal power is gone and good riddance. What else is left? That's Joyce speaking. And it seemed like the way he viewed it is the Enlightenment rationalists and monarchs, and the monarchs who ascribed that dogma to them, they contributed to this seedbed of a regressive, hypocritical 19th century political landscape that was kind of rhetorically alleging reason and progress when practically they were producing economic stagnation and suffering among common laborers. You think about the Irish potato famine and whatnot, the people who tilled the soil of the seedbed in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think back to the part that I read about Earwicker talking about all these incredible things he's done. He's built these grand tenement blocks, but that kind of external narrating voice interjects and kind of rudely informs us what the actual state of those tenement blocks are. And if I could just read again from page 543, fair homes, overcrowded, tidy but little furniture, respectable, whole family attends daily mass, is dead sick of bread and butter, sometimes in the militia, mentally strained from reading work on German physics, and shares closet with 8 other dwellings. Like, this isn't a beautiful apartment block he's running here. It's a slum, right?
Right.
When Earwicker's in this position where he's kind of petitioning to the Vox Populi of Dublin, he's trying to justify his crimes in this almost Trumpian way, which, sorry if that's too soon for people. These things I've done are all excusable because I've done these incredible things for the European world. But we're talking the urbanization of London leading to these rotting slums, the industrialization that pollutes the Liffey River. Like this is that revolution beginning to turn sour, the autocrat installing himself, and the cycle's about to turn back into that original beginning. And we're just tipping into part 4 here. So I bring this up because my theory of this chapter is that this is the moment that history is about to consign HCE to the margins, to the wings, and he's trying to cling on to his primacy in the narrative, but inevitably he will fade into the mist, that protean mist that comprises predominantly the first chapter as everything kind of swells up in the dream. I don't know. Am I rambling here? Does this make
No. It's great, and one of the things that we often do is we anchor ourselves in what the Oxford World Classic summarizes the section is, and it doesn't say very much. It's interesting though, but I think the phrasing is quite interesting because the summary of this section, there are no breaks in this section. This is one single section. This is 532.6 to 554, and it just describes it as HCE's long boastful statement of innocence and success as a great urban planner, all done for ALP, punctuated with brief remarks from the fore. And so I think that's really interesting, the fact that it's this boastful statement of innocence, which does feel very much like American politics right now, the idea of what I've created, regardless of the results or regardless of who I've hurt to do so, the success is a great urban planner, but done for someone else. So pushed it off to ALP. And then I found it really interesting, the blazon for his family crest that he describes. He describes it throughout this chapter, but he gives himself his family motto. And his family motto is Heri Cras Evo Hodie, which obviously is an HCE summary. But Heri Cras Evo Hodie translates to yesterday, tomorrow, even today. So it's the idea of the eternity, the idea of the self-perception of eternity, but the reality that the next generation's coming. So you can do all of these sort of things, but you're also rotting, you're also fading, they're also out of fashion, you're also the things that you created with the best of intentions or the best of intentions to make money have now resulted in a tenement block, or have now resulted in overcrowding, have now resulted in famine. And so it's a really it's a really interesting take on this on this section, and so giving us a sense of what HCE represents here. And obviously he represents all things, as we saw in the diagram that so clearly says he can be anything you want him to be.
It's one of many possible interpretations.
Yeah.
And that's part of what makes it such a rewarding book. One of the few books that I think has continually appreciating returns, because you'll never go back to this book and get the same thing out of it twice. And that's what Joyce wanted for us, right? It is a circle to keep reading over and over and over again.
Absolutely. Look, I think we could probably talk about this all day, but I've kept you for a long time, so I'm going to let you go there. I mean, there's so much to talk about, and I think we can continue the conversation on Instagram and continue to talk about all this. I don't know do you have a Finnegans Wake section on your channel yet, on your W.A.S.T.E Mailing List YouTube, or
I have a half-edited deep dive into it.
Wonderful.
I've been a derelict of my duties when it comes to the editing of it. I will have something out in the next, I'm aiming for month.
Wonderful.
And hopefully we'll cover some of the ground that we didn't get to cover here. But regardless, Toby, it was an absolute pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And this episode should come out mid-January, so maybe we'll dovetail those two releases together. But yeah, it's been a real pleasure having you here. Obviously, we talked about it pre-recording that both of us left our home countries as exchange students and went away and fell in love with people from the other countries. So I moved to Canada and you moved to Australia, but you're a Canadian in Australia and I'm an Australian in Canada. So we have that connection. But also we have this Finnegans Wake that brings us together.
Life has its cutesy little circularities.
It sure does. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is all the time we have this week for Wake. We'll return next week to finish up this chapter as we push on into the final 100 pages of the book. I've been Toby Malone, sending my love to TJ Young, still stuck in a meeting. My thanks so much to Seth Austin for being here with us, and really, it's been so illuminating. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. Until next time.
Yes, absolutely. We'll see you next week, wasters and pasters. This has been Wake, a cold reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, just to hear it out loud. If you've made it this far, thank you for your dedication. Join us next week for another segment of Finnegans Wake and a chat about what we've found. Wake is a Moon Street Media podcast, engineered by TJ Young and Toby Malone. Our theme song is The Ballad of Perso Riley, arranged and performed by Meg Logue after James Joyce. Wake is recorded in Canada, where Finnegans Wake is in the public domain. For community and bonus content, join us at our free Patreon at patreon.com/wakepod. If you have questions about Finnegans Wake, don't ask us. We're just as confused as you are. See you next week.